Not as many big-time matchups here in Week 2 as there were in Week 1, but we're going to start with the one that's going to be up in Leo, and we're talking about Angola at Leo. Angola got a big conference win against a West Noble team that was 5-5 last year, returned 17 starters, so they're feeling pretty good. And then they're taking on a Leo team that we just mentioned, blasted Norwell at Norwell last week.
Well, yes, Norwell's down, and so that was a little bit of a misnomer game, but Leo is really, really strong, like you mentioned. Reed Rohrbacher had 121 yards rushing and a couple of TDs. Leiter threw for almost 200 yards and had a pair of touchdowns, and then Gage Corner had 143 yards receiving and a pair of touchdowns. So, like you said, they graduated a lot of players, but they have so many players coming back. And I give kudos to Leo for scheduling Angola, a really tough team that won 9 games and a share of the NECC conference title last year. They dropped DeKalb, they picked up Leo, which toughens that schedule, better prepares them for that late season matchup with Cherubusco. Angola looked really, really good in their first game. Skylar Parker had over 250 yards rushing and 4 TDs, and Robbie Boots, who's one of the best receivers in northeastern Indiana, had over 100 yards receiving and a touchdown. That program's really rolling under Coach Amstutz. They won 8 games the 2 years prior to his arrival. They've won 22 games in the 3 years plus 1 game that he's been there. So the Hornets have it going on right now, and I think that's really going to be a challenging matchup for Leo. I think Leo will get it done because they are at home, though.
When you take a look at that game, I know Parker had the yards, but offensively Angola has been under coach a more of a passing offense, a passing attack. Leo's more of a rushing attack, although they've balanced it out. Is this kind of a case of whichever defense makes the most stops, that's going to be the team that wins?
Well, Leo really is going to be a difficult matchup for Angola because, like we said, they can run the ball, they can pass the ball. So there's really nowhere that you can key on. Like with Busco, you know they're going to run the ball every time. But with Leo, they're so versatile, they're a difficult matchup for teams. So I think that versatility is going to cause Angola problems.
All right, and another interesting matchup is a SAC matchup, Zollner Stadium. Bragging rights on the line for the 2 teams that play there in Concordia at Bishop Dwenger. Obviously, Dwenger goes in heavily favored in this one. But if you're Chris Schwarzkopf and you take a look at the 24-6 win against Southside, there were some areas for improvement. How do you think they approach this game and head into a matchup with Concordia, who, you know, they're going to give it their best shot?
Well, Concordia is going to give it their best shot, but Dwenger is a growing program. I know that sounds crazy to say about a 5-time defending SAC champion and defending state runner-up and all that, but Dwenger has so many new faces out there right now that they just want to get comfortable with all their young players and gain more experience. So this is a good matchup for the young Dwenger players to get into a game situation and just get experience. Yes, they're going to beat Concordia. They're going to beat them badly because Dwenger is such a good program, but it's really going to be valuable for the Saints program because they will just get those young kids more and more time on the field.
And when you take a look at Dalton Wheeler, he got hit pretty hard there in the first quarter.
Very hard.
Some ribs. He didn't look so good, but then he comes back in the second quarter, breaks a 58-yard touchdown run. It looked, I'll tell you, standing there on the sidelines, it looked painful, like he was waiting for someone to take him down so he didn't have to run and keep messing with those ribs. But I know you talked to him at the scrimmage. What do you like about him as a quarterback taking over for Dwenger?
I like his maturity and his leadership. I mean, it's funny how Dwenger just plugs in new guys every single year at quarterback, and they play so well. But how about the leadership that Wheeler shows against Southside? I mean, nobody could have blamed the kid if he would have sat out the rest of the game after the shot that he took. But he not only sits out a couple series, and then he comes back in and plays great. And so not only his toughness and leadership, that's admirable, but he also has a nice little handy tool that he can hand off to Steven Espinoza, which makes the job of a first-year quarterback so much easier. And Espinoza ran for over 100 yards. So Dwenger is going to be Dwenger this year. They're going to contend for the SAC championship. I think Lures is in the driver's seat right now, but it's going to be really, really close.
And when you jump out of the city, a big game at Columbia City, when you're talking about Whitko and Columbia City, that's the Eel City rival, or the Eel River rivalry.
Right.
They renewed it last year after about half a decade of not playing. Columbia City won that one big. I know Wayne Swender would like nothing more than to knock off the Eagles at their place, but that's going to be tough for Whitko this year.
It's going to be tough. It's going to be virtually impossible. I mean, Columbia City looked really, really good the first week. Cody Wildman had 160 yards and I think a couple of touchdowns. And Jared Murphy, like you mentioned earlier, played really well in his first game of quarterback. He had 11 completions out of 18 attempts, so he was solid. Last year they beat Whitko 30-0, so I wouldn't be surprised if it's something along those lines. You know, the Wildcats struggled last week against Wawasee and got shut out. So it's a rivalry game, so you never know, but I would be stunned if Columbia City is threatened at all this week.
All right, and then you take a look at week 1, totally in the rear view now. What are some things that you're looking most forward to about week 2?
I want to see growth from the different programs and the young players. Some of these players that we don't really know much about, I want to see if they can improve. Like the New Haven offensive line, can they do a better job this week than they did last week? And can these young Dwenger players take the next step? And maybe some other faces rise to the top for Dwenger other than Wheeler and Espinoza. And can they play a little bit better defensively? You know, Southside only scored 6 points, but they did threaten them on several occasions. So I just want to see growth from these programs taking the next step.
All right, it should be a very interesting week 2. Tom will have you covered all week long in the News Sentinel, and we'll have you covered Friday night on another edition of The Highlights. So for Tom, I'm Glenn, and we'll see you next week.